Welcome back to Buddha Bites. I'm Iris Fairfax, and this is episode 17. If you like what we do here, it would be great if you would hit the like, subscribe, share with your friends, and comment. I have to be candid with you. I've been thinking about Tarte Tatin for a long time, but it was this morning o'clock when I actually tried to make my first one. It was a failure. It went straight into the trash. I think that some of the lessons that I learned between then and now are useful for me to share with you. Of course, we're filming in the summertime and the peaches are at their peak of ripeness. So this is the perfect time to make this sort of a dessert. It is very easy and it's a little different from the super healthy dish that we did the last time. So let's go into the kitchen and make Tarte Tatin. All right, Tarte Tatin starts out with puff pastry. Now you know me and puff pastry. I like to keep it around, and since the first one went in the trash, I'm really glad that I keep it around because I had 2 other sheets of it. So the beautiful thing about this particular puff pastry, it's a tri-fold, and it is in a little bit of wax paper. I'm going to roll it out on parchment, which will keep me from having to flour it. And as you see, the manufacturer, the maker of the puff pastry already has floured this on the top. So I shouldn't have to put additional flour on it. We're gonna roll it out just a little bit. This is not a huge rolling operation. If I wanted the parchment to not move, I would put something sticky down, but I'm really not so worried about that right now. I just want to roll this out to smooth out some of the tri-fold lines. I'm not making this look easy because I probably should have put a little bit of something down on my marble, but that's no big deal. And so this is, I think, around the shape that I need. What I'm going to do now is I'll take the pan that I'm going to use and trace around it. So it clearly looks like I need a little bit more of a margin. So I'm going to roll that out a tiny bit more. I'll probably just put a little bit more of my body into it. Of course, the part closest to me is the most vexing part. And then I'm going to turn it around a little bit. Maybe that'll help me. I truly am not making this look as easy as it actually is. But this recipe, you will see, only has 4 ingredients. It has this puff pastry, brown sugar, peaches, and butter. That is all that it is. So, and it's, it sounds like a shishi French dessert, but that is all that it is. So I think that this gets me the margin that I want. I'm going to go back and measure this. You want a pan that is about 8 inches on the bottom and about 10 inches to either side. The wonderful thing about this Gotham steel brand is it's very light. It's great for people who are getting older. It's great for people who are dealing with arthritis because it's a good quality, but it's still a little bit lighter in your hands. So I really like it, and it goes straight into the oven. You want to make sure that the pan that you use has a handle that is not going to melt, because this whole thing is going to go into the oven. So now I'm going to trace around a little bit. I'm going to leave a lip, maybe about a little less than an inch around, because that is going to become part of our crust, if you want to put it that way. Now I'm left-handed, so let's see how well I do this. I'm not even going to try to do it right-handed. I'm not going to embarrass myself twice today. Okay, so you will want to save these scraps, because on a day that I am feeling a little bit more adventurous, I've had enough adventures today. You can take some of these scraps and make little pretty decorative leaves out of them and decorate the top. There's always a use for these little scraps. I'm going to wrap them in plastic wrap. And so this has served its purpose for the moment, so I'm going to just shift it over here. Now, this puff pastry is going to go on a pan, a little sheet pan. Get this. I was so happy when I moved into this apartment because I have a gas stove. I went to cook something in it only to discover that my half sheet pans didn't fit. So I ended up having to order quarter sheet pans, which is what this is, and they fit into my oven. So this is going to go into the refrigerator, and we're going to get to the business of the peaches. On to the peaches. I found some really nice peaches at my local farm stand. That's another benefit of me moving where I moved. I have a farm stand within walking distance of my home. So you want peaches that are ripe but not too soft, because they need to be able to keep a little bit of shape when they are in the oven, which is preheating to 425 degrees. I am going around the circumference of the peach from stem to stern, and sometimes we have what's known as a freestone. You tend to not know what you're going to get until you get it. In this case, this looks like a freestone peach. The opposite of freestone is cling. And that means that you might need a little bit of extra effort to get the pit out. I find sometimes that a melon baller would work. Also a spoon if you need to use a spoon. So you will want to cut them skin side down about a quarter of an inch. And I'm just using a paring knife. You want to keep them essentially in the shape that you're cutting them. In fact, what will help me is that I'm going to use an offset spatula, and I'm going to transfer them to this sheet pan, which is lined with more parchment. And I will leave them there in shape because it's going to help you to form the really pretty pattern. This is basically this is an upside down pie. And so this is going in the bottom, and when you turn it out, you will see this pretty design, so you want it to be as nice as possible. So while I'm cutting these, you're going to need about 3 to 4 of these peaches depending on the size. These are really behaving on me. I really appreciate that. Let's see. One of the problems that I had earlier was that I really tried too hard and did too much. The first thing that I did was I peeled the peaches. That is not helpful. After I did a little quick internet research, the reason why I should not have done that is that the skins of the peach have a decent amount of pectin in them. And the pectin is going to help them to create more of a gloss, help them to keep more structure, help to keep the juices from running all over the place. And one of the problems with the Tarte Tatin that I made earlier is it absolutely did not hold its shape. Juice was all over the place. And it was just a disaster. Now this one looks like it could use a little bit of, all it needs is a little bit more effort. I'd like to tell you while I'm doing this that the Tarte Tatin, I was very much in rhythm with the creators of the Tarte Tatin. The creators of the Tarte Tatin were, let's see, Stephanie and what was the other one? Caroline and Stephanie Tatin. And they had a hotel, the Hotel Tatin in France. And I believe that Was Stephanie the pastry chef at the time? I believe it was. You may want to, I don't know if you can hold me to that. But one of the sisters was trying to make an apple dessert. The traditional tarte tatin is apple, not peach. And that's going to actually speak to one of the other mistakes that I made. And she was distracted. And so she ended up making a mess of the dessert that she was trying to make. So she said, well, why don't I just take the pastry and put it on top of the caramelized fruit? And that was one of the legends of how the tarte tatin came to be. I'm going to leave this. I don't think I'm going to need it. So these are all in nice shapes that I'll be able to make use of when it comes time to actually dress the tart. I'm going to wash my hands real quick and we're going to go to the stove. All right, the stove goes on. I can't tell you how happy I am that I have a gas stove. It makes a world of difference. It heats up so much more quickly. So, all it takes is equal amounts of brown sugar and butter. You need 4 tablespoons of butter. You don't have to slice it up. You don't need to cube it, nothing fancy. Boom. Just goes in there, heat it up nicely. And in fact, I can turn this up nice and high. And while this melts, I'm going to tell you more about the Tatin sisters and their hotel. So, I just thought that it was cute that the Tatin sisters, first of all, that I thought that Tatin meant something besides just their name. It didn't. I thought that it was cute that their names are the same names of Princess Grace of Monaco's daughters. So all of this was happening in around 1880 at their hotel. I'd love to know if that still exists. Maybe it's too much to expect, but yeah, I'm at some point I'd like to find out a little bit more about this Tatin hotel, Hotel Tatin. Again, it sounds so she, but when you look at this, it's so much easier than making a pie. For any of you who have a fear of pie crusts, which is one that I'm going to turn this up all the way, that I am working my way through. I'm gaining some skill with pie crusts. But if you don't want to deal with a pie crust, this is a perfect solution. You take your puff pastry from the freezer, you defrost it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes before you take it out, unfold it, and roll it, pop it back in the refrigerator. That's all you have to do. So that is one of the beauties of this dessert. So cooking math, again, is 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. A half a cup of butter is a stick of butter. So you want 1/2 of a stick of butter. And while this is doing its thing, you need as much brown sugar. Just 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Tap that in there. And just let it dissolve a tiny bit. Not a tremendous amount. You want to, obviously this, even though this is an easy-ish recipe, you don't, it takes a little bit of attention. This is not something that you want to walk away from, because you know from what we've done before that sugar goes from 0 to burned in the time that it takes you to turn your back. Now you don't need this to be totally dissolved. You just want it to get to a little bit of a simmer, which is not going to take very long. And the beauty of this method is that this is a non-stick pan. I had previously used a cast iron pan, which can be fine. But one of the things about the cast iron pan is that this is a dessert that you're going to have to eventually flip. And flipping a cast iron skillet is not one of the easiest things in the world. So this is the other benefit of having a lighter pan. So this is about ready to go. You see that there are little bubbles that are forming on this. Now very carefully, because you're dealing with hot sugar is one of the hottest things known to mankind. So you definitely want to be super careful when you are laying out these peaches. And eventually you may even reduce the heat a little bit. I'm going to reduce this heat a tiny bit. And please be super duper careful. In fact, I'm going to just start to go on the perimeter, and sometimes however it falls. But you want to try to keep these sort of going in a nice pattern. That's why we kept them all in place this way. And just go around the perimeter of your pan. You see that I am not coming close to touching this hot sugar. That is so dangerous. If there are any spots that you need to fill in the meantime, that's fine. If it comes down to a point where you feel like you're in danger, just let it fall. You can take a knife or a fork and straighten it out later. It is not worth a third-degree burn just to get a pretty design. You can fix that. Simple, right? See, I'll be fixing that in a moment. There's plenty of time. So this will go around. I'm going to try to use the largest pieces. And then we're going to come in. You see, I made a whole lot more. I cut a whole lot more peaches than I'm actually going to need. But they are going to shrink a little bit as they cook. So I'd rather have more than I need than less. It's like so many things in life. It's better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. So when I made my foul up earlier today, I actually had to go run to the farm stand and go get more peaches, and it's a rainy day today. So I was in the rain, I was in puddles, just jumping in puddles to try to get more of these peaches so that today wouldn't be a washout. So I'm going to in fact, I think I'm going to move to a fork so that I can have a little bit of grabbing power for this, to move this sucker around that doesn't want to yield to my desires. And in fact, I might even put a little bit more in here. And this is going to have a lovely design once we unmold it. Now, let's see. Now that this is in place, and I think this is about as much as we need, we're going to shut off the heat, and the residual heat and the heat of the sugar is sufficient to just kind of keep the peaches cooking. Now, as I mentioned before, the original Tarte Tatin was apple, and apple has a lot more of a strong structure to it. Peaches are super delicate, especially when they are as ripe as we want them to be. So the actual original Tarte Tatin recipe had, putting the apples in and stirring them around. That's how the Joy of Cooking cookbook had it. I was like, I'm not going to be stirring these things around and then having to pick them up and place them. Frankly, that's dangerous. So we do not want that. Easy peasy. So this is going to settle, and the syrup is setting even now. You see this? The syrup is not going all over the place. And that's largely due to the fact that I kept the skins on these peaches. And another benefit of keeping the skins on the peaches is that they add an added dimension of color from the color of the skins that is imparted into the color of the overall dish. So this is going to sit for just about 5 minutes or less, and then I'm gonna go get the puff pastry that's waiting for me in the refrigerator. Hang tight. So as you see, not very much has changed in 5 minutes. It's just settled a little bit. You see that as I'm moving it around, the syrup is a little bit more stationary. it's a little bit more set than 5 minutes ago. So now the puff pastry has come out of the refrigerator. It's just chilled. It's just chilled. So I'm going to take the puff pastry and lay it. Yes, the parchment is behaving. Praise be. Am I speaking too soon? Yes, it's gonna come off. It's gonna come off. It is a little warm in here, but that's okay. It's gonna come off. And if a little bit of it comes off on the parchment, that is not tragic. This is a rustic dish. So, parchment goes bye-bye. Doesn't matter what side you put it on. And you know what? If you want to add nutmeg, if you want to add other warm spices, cinnamon, that's fine. But I love the idea that this particular recipe just highlights the beauty of and the deliciousness of the ripe fruit. So that's what I'm going to do now. So we will lay this on top of the pan, and I am going to create a little bit of a crimp around, because this is in essence going to be our pie crust. I can pretty much just do this by hand, still keeping in mind that there is hot sugar in this, even though it's only been sitting for a little while. You can coax it down into the margins a little bit, because that's going to help to keep the juices in. You see how this is sort of sticking out a little bit? I want to tuck this in a little bit more. One of the other mistakes is I was trying to be fancy and I put cubed butter on this. I thought, oh, that'll give it extra sheen. Didn't need to do that. All it did was it made the whole thing juicier. Sometimes you just have to follow instructions. Sometimes simple is best. So this goes into my oven, which has been preheating at 425 degrees. That's all it is. You want to put it on sort of the upper third of the stove, where it will be for 20 minutes. And while that is baking, we're going to make a cocktail to go with it. So what are we going to serve to drink with this delicious dessert? My tendency, just because I like dry wines, dry sparkling wines, dry champagnes, is to drink something dry. My friend Toffer, who knows all things wine, set me straight last night. He said, the concept of a dessert wine is to have a sweet wine. Why? Because you're having a sweet dessert. And if you have a dry spirit to go with a sweet dessert, it sort of counteracts the sweetness of your dessert. And that's the time that you do want something sweet. So, lesson learned. So then I had to think to myself, what is sweet that would go well with this dessert? Well, I happen to have some Lillet, which is used in some iterations of French martinis, and of course it is French, so it's a lovely sort of a citrus, almost like a fortified wine. And I thought it might be a nice option to serve this just over ice all by itself. That's a great option. There's also Vin Santo or any number of the sweet dessert wines that might be a really nice option. I wouldn't necessarily do a port with it. I think that would overpower the peaches. I would definitely go light. And then Lisa and I were fiddling around in the kitchen and we came up with a cocktail. This is it. So we're gonna put some ice in these glasses. These were actually water goblets that were a wedding present to me years ago. They lasted far longer than the marriage did. I will say that he and I are still good friends, and I got to keep the glasses, so that's good. So, my mom bought this peach brandy. She's partial to peaches, and she's not much of a drinker. So she bought this for me, and I said thank you. But I thought, I'm really not going to be drinking this as is. It's kind of I'm not going to do it. So I've kept it around for a little while, but I've actually found that there was a good use for it in this. The other thing that Mom just got, she went to Linvilla Orchards and got some of the peaches that are the stars of the show today. And this peach cider beverage is one of the things that she brought back. So, ideas. Everything to me is a potential ingredient. So what I did, and I'm not going to do it here now, but is that I mixed these together. This peach cider beverage, almost like equal amounts, and this peach brandy. And so I made this little mixture here, and I am going to do my best to divide it equally. You see that pretty color that it gives you? Between the two glasses, and there's a little bit extra for when we want to top it off later. And Lisa was requesting fizz. So I happen to have this cool, like, bold ginger ale. I love bold ginger. You and I have discussed this before because I made that ginger brew several episodes before. So instead of having to pull out my soda stream, we're adding flavor by topping this drink off with this bold ginger ale. And we're just going to give it a teeny tiny little stir. It doesn't need much. You have to realize, when you're dealing with carbonated beverages, the carbonation stirs the drink. So you really don't need to agitate carbonated beverages, and in fact, you really don't want to, because then you might have an explosion on your hands. So, by the way, I just want to show you, I can't stop using these cute little brownware bowls. That's where my ice was. But anyway, let's take a little taste of this. I'm going to hand this off to my sister. Dirt. Okay, so I'm gonna clean this up, and we are almost ready to turn out our peach tart tatin. At last, the great moment has come at last. Look at this. And I want to let you know that halfway through the baking process, I had forgotten to cut a couple of slits into the puff pastry to allow the steam to escape and to allow some of the juice to evaporate. So I took it out and put the slits in and put it back in. So that's what those slits are. So look at how this is still sort of loose in the pan, which is what we want. So, ooh, goodness, the moment of truth. And please keep in mind, don't try to do, oh, this has actually cooled down a little bit, so I can take this off. But be aware that it might be hot, so be careful. Now, we're going to flip it over. You ready? Uno, un, deux, trois, un. Look at this. That is a beautiful tarte tatin. Thank you, pan. You have done your work. And this is where you take a paring knife, and invariably some of these peach slices will have shifted a little bit. You just take the knife while it is still hot. And remember, you're dealing with hot sugar, so be very careful as you move some of these peaches back into place. Yummy. Look at that. It's beautifully formed. It still has a little bit of juiciness that is going to sort of congeal a little bit as it sits. And we are going to gently move this from a plate to our serving platter. This takes, as Julia Child says, the courage of your convictions. Look at that. So, 4 whopping ingredients, and I would say that start to finish, this took me about 40 minutes. And I say that because when the first one went bad, I rushed to make another one, and it did not take that long at all. So just about 40 minutes start to finish for an elegant dessert. You can serve this with whipped cream, fresh whipped cream. You and I have done that before. You can do that with, you can serve it with ice cream. Just something that doesn't take away from the star of the show, which is these beautiful peaches. And so let's take this into the dining room and take a taste. Couldn't wait any longer. You know, I actually made another one, and so this had cooled much more substantially than the one that we just made. Remember, we're dealing with hot sugar. Even though the recipe says serve immediately, you really don't want to serve this immediately. You'll burn the roof of your mouth. Why would you want to do that? So this one was ready to go, calling my name. A beautiful Tarte Tatin, originated by Caroline and Stephanie Tatin, and we discovered during one of our little breaks through our research that the Hotel Tatin is still in existence. It is called La Maison Tatin. So it is still serving people, and it is still a place where one can lay one's head. So look at this gorgeous dessert that you can make. I trust me, you can do this. So let's give it a try. The point is always the best part. Yep, this is great. It's great at room temperature or slightly warmer. If you want to pop it in the oven, I always want to get a little bit of the crust. If you want to pop it in the oven and warm it up a tiny little bit before you serve it, that's also fine. I wouldn't necessarily serve it bone cold because you really can't taste the flavors as well. And look at what I decided to do while we were breaking. It's like, why not add peaches to this cocktail? So, I can't get enough of this. It's nice and light. It's sweet, but not too sweet. It doesn't compete with this. It complements it. So, give Tarte Tatin a try, and let me know in the comments how it went for you. If you cannot find perfect peaches, you can try some other stone fruit. I had great experience with nectarines in place of peaches. They're in the same family. They have a little bit more of a bite to them. So don't necessarily feel that you are locked into just doing this with peaches. Try other stone fruits and see how you like it. And then maybe go back and do the original one with the apples and let me know how you do. So I'm going to light into this thing. So I leave you. Thank you for joining us. This is Iris Fairfax for Buddha Bites. Do remember, you are the Buddha.